it's with much enthusiasm that I introduce Lynette Fields from St. Luke's United Methodist Church in Orlando. Join me in saying welcome.
When I was an eager theology student in college in the 1980s and ready to take on the world, I first heard the phrase 1 in 5. 1 in 5 children in the United States lived in poverty then. That number rocked my world and helped shape the direction of my career and planted seeds for my decision to study social work. Yet in the course of my entire adult life, that statistic hasn't changed. Over the last decade, we've been waking up to that reality. In one of the richest countries in the world, we haven't moved the needle on childhood poverty in a generation. Yet, we have spent billions of private and public dollars, given millions of volunteer hours, bought hundreds and thousands of Christmas toys, sponsored thousands of food drives, and yet the needle has not moved. Something needs to change. St. Luke's United Methodist Church in Orlando has been on a journey in the last 8 years, reflecting on our relationships within our mission ministries, asking hard questions, and shifting our filter through which we view service. We have identified 6 critical components we believe are essential to prepare us to serve with the intent of getting different results. We are shifting from focusing on the volunteer experience to listening to the community, from being busy to becoming more effective, and from addressing issues to engaging people in specific places. Component number 1, good intentions and quality volunteer experiences are not enough, and your church needs a catalyst to change that. About 8 years ago, a whole new group of St. Luke's volunteers started spending time in elementary schools that have a high percentage of low-income families and don't have the parent or community involvement that other schools might take for granted. Having hour-long shifts during the workday diversified our volunteer base. Professionals could go on their lunch hour. We even got rocket scientists to teach math. Our volunteers began to see that you might help for an hour in the classroom, encouraging a child to read. But if there were not books at home, or if a parent didn't speak English, or if they worked 2 jobs, then all the classroom volunteers our church could offer would not even begin to scratch the surface of the need. Our experience with this ministry and other ministries helped us understand that focusing on the child alone, or education alone, or housing alone would not make long-lasting change. Like other churches, we had had good intentions prior to this, but if we were honest with ourselves, for the most part, we had been helping a group of unknown poor people, giving Christmas gifts to children we didn't know personally, organizing food drives for families we didn't know. If we really didn't know who we were helping, how would we ever know if what we were giving made a difference? We needed to make it more personal and know the children and families by name. Component number 2, congregational transformation must happen alongside community transformation. How did we move mission from something that was a focus of a small group of mission-minded people to being a cornerstone of our church-wide vision? Appreciative inquiry was our strategic visioning process. We ask ourselves, what will God do through St. Luke's over the next 5 years? We involved the whole congregation and outlined our world-changing ideas. One of those was titled, Meet Jesus on the Road, and it was our dream to positively impact the lives of children experiencing poverty. And if we really wanted to positively impact the lives of children living in poverty, we also needed to work with their families. And if the families lived in the same community, maybe the neighborhood could begin to change. Our tagline became, ending poverty, one family, one neighborhood at a time. And unlike anything we had done before, we raised money for all the world-changing ideas under one campaign. Instead of doing a separate capital campaign for the building and leaving the big idea for community transformation on its own, or spinning it off as a nonprofit organization that we were no longer responsible for, we raised the money for the building and the community transformation initiative at the same time. We, and I mean we collectively as service providers, have been offering services that are transactional rather than relational. We've been managing poverty rather than eliminating poverty. We have focused on the volunteer experience, counted the meals we serve, and tracked the goods we donate. Even in my denomination, we ask for the number of volunteers who serve, the number of people we've served, but we are not asked about the change that has occurred because of that service. In our ministries, rarely were we asking those being served what they needed or how they could be a part of their own solution. To shift to a more transformational model, we needed training. This training has helped us as a congregation uncover our assumptions about the causes of poverty and the hidden roles between classes. It has helped us reflect on our own biases so we could better understand and communicate with people from diverse backgrounds. And we understood that service providers needed to change, not just those being served. One of our volunteers, after he spent months working every week in the classroom, shared that he cared much more about the decisions that were being made in Tallahassee, our state capital, now that he had a front row seat in the classroom. Grace, a small business owner, shared in worship that the relationships she made as a volunteer changed the way she worked with her own employees. We were beginning to understand that God was transforming our church. This was not just about community transformation. We were being transformed in the process. Their journey became our journey. Component number 3, it is vital to listen to your community. As we learned to listen, it changed our perceptions about what was needed. In one focus group, we learned that people on hourly pay needed help with their utility bills in January after missing days of work over the holidays instead of Christmas presents. As we moved in Community Transformation Initiative, we didn't want to look at a map and pick a neighborhood that fit our needs. Over the course of several months, we talked to residents, neighborhood groups, elected officials, and organizations. We asked questions and then we listened. We wanted a cross-section of people who wanted us there. We sought an invitation to walk alongside the neighborhood rather than imposing ourselves on the neighborhood. And we asked permission. It was only after a long discernment process that the community of East Winter Garden allowed us to partner with them. As good Methodists, the first thing we wanted to do was to create a task force with people from the St. Luke's community and representative residents. Luckily, we had developed a relationship with Sabrina. She served as one of our cultural brokers. Sabrina was not an elected official or the head of an organization. She didn't necessarily fit the title leader in the traditional sense, but she was a leader to those she worked with most in the community. She advised us not to put together a team too quickly and not to work with just one church or just one pastor or just one organization. Very wisely, she recommended that we spend time getting to know the residents, understanding life in the community, and building trust by being there. We bought a house that had been abandoned for a few years so we could establish a presence, that we were serious about this and we were not going anywhere soon. Churches coming from outside of a neighborhood don't always have good reputations inside of the neighborhood. Sometimes churches are seen as just getting good photo ops or doing drive-through charity, but not sticking around for the hard work. It is a challenge to change this perception. Early on, we wanted to get pictures of some of the children we were working with, and we needed a photo release. Their grandmother was uncertain about our attentions, protective of her grandchildren. So she interviewed us to make sure we were going to be around for a while before she signed the release. By coming back again and again and keeping our promise, we earned the opportunity to work with this well-respected community leader. For our asset mapping, we worked with Polis Institute. They hired local people to survey the community rather than use St. Luke's volunteers. It was much more effective employing people known in the neighborhood, and this process provided jobs. In 3 months, they knocked on every door and surveyed 78% of the households. We asked the residents about what change they would like to see in the neighborhood and if they were willing to work to see that change happen. We held community meetings to begin to work toward that change. We heard stories of the rich history of the neighborhood from long-term residents. Component number 4, shift the focus to the place and its assets. St. Luke's historically is a regional church, which led our community mission outreach to being very broad across Central Florida. We followed the passion of our membership and the needs we continuously desired to address. That meant we were building habitat houses on one side of the county and helping children in the classrooms on the other side. While we knew we did really good work and supported our wonderful community partners, our relationships with those we were serving were brief and most often addressed one need or one issue at a time. If we had multiple encounters with individuals or family, it was more by accident than by design. As we started on this venture, we believed that by focusing in one community, we could design multiple encounters with entire families or households and more faithfully follow long-term change. And our hope was that this would create a momentum of change in one place. So we centered on a neighborhood and the people and not an issue. And we were place-based, 1 square mile to be exact. We wanted our language to be focused on assets, not problems. So we leaned heavily on the work of John McKnight and asset-based community development. To get people involved and to get money invested, church or community leaders often focus on the problem. We tell a compelling, heartstring-pulling story about hungry children, lack of housing, lack of education, and crime. Could we alter our lens and our language and see the strengths of a neighborhood, not just the problems? We couldn't go into East Winter Garden with the idea that we could fix it. We entered into a relationship to discover the gifts that were already there. In one of our weekly meetings, we have a saying, everyone has something to learn and everyone has something to give. A moment of confession. Our initial title for this initiative was Take Jesus on the Road. In one of our early trainings, that language was pointed out, and we realized that we did not and do not have the corner on Jesus. Jesus is already there, and we were called to join him in that work. We began to see things in a new way through a different filter. In one of our community meetings, the residents themselves lifted up all the assets of their own neighborhood, and you could hear the sense of pride emerge as all the strengths were named one by one and written down. Component number 5, lead by stepping back. If you fill every gap, there is no gap left to fill. Our volunteer base had to unlearn and then learn anew to be able to partner with instead of for others. St. Luke's is between Disney and Universal. Our church is full of problem solvers. After all, we get millions of people to pay a lot of money to come to Florida in the heat of the summer. We are innovative people for sure. We see a challenge, we come up with 10 ways to fix it. However, it is hard for us to lead by stepping back. A few years ago, one of our schools invited us to help with an event they have been doing for years. The first year, we helped them with their plans. Then in St. Luke's style, the next year we upped our game, brought more volunteers, and brought more stuff. The next year we did even more. Then a funny thing happened. Our volunteers started to notice that there weren't very many teachers or parents from the school helping anymore, and we got a little resentful. Someone asked why more people weren't helping. Their response, St. Luke's does it all. They don't need us anymore. It took until our 3rd year before a neighborhood alliance was formed. It was not in our timing. We had to step back so that those most impacted by the changes in vision could be the loudest heard. So what does lead by stepping back look like? In the Household Economic Stability Program, the family creates this plan for change. In the door-to-curb home repair and beautification program, the homeowner picks the plants and the paint colors. The school plans their calendar events, then we support their plans. Every community event has shared leadership involved in the planning. In community meetings with elected officials, the white men keep quiet so others can speak. We have incredible volunteer involvement, but we require anyone who is doing what we call frontline or relationship building ministries to go through a minimum of 6 hours of training. This is where we learn and coach each other about stepping back. When we first got started, people thought that no one would make that kind of a commitment. After all, it was hard enough to get involvement without having such a steep requirement. But what we have learned is that volunteers really want to be equipped, and they will stay committed if they want to see real change. Component number 6, dismantle obstacles preventing change. There is often a debate about what causes poverty, individual choices or an oppressive system. Bridges Out of Poverty discusses this. Yes, people make bad decisions, but there are also bad systems in place. One example is that for multiple years in a row, Orlando has ranked as having the lowest wages in one of the top metropolitan cities in the country. Many organizations and churches in our region help families in emergency, but we didn't know of anything with a holistic, strength-based approach. And we didn't want to change the statistics of a neighborhood by moving people out of that neighborhood. We needed to help families improve their household income. That led St. Luke's to partner with Circles USA, which is a national model that has proven success in increasing household income and decreasing household dependence on public and private charities. And this happens through a matching of those families who live in poverty, who are called leaders, with allies who are middle to upper middle class volunteers. Circles is helping individual households gain economic stability, which is critical to improving the lives of children. In our first 2 classes of Circle leaders who completed 18 months, we have seen a 51% increase in household income and a 79% decrease in debt. One of the most effective trainings we offer is the Cost of Poverty experience. It is through this 3-hour experiential workshop that it really started to sink in how much it costs to be poor. If you don't have money, it costs you more to have a bank account. If you have an emergency and don't have a savings account, the interest rate on a payday loan can cost you more than the original loan did in the first place. Those of us who are middle class tend to teach from what we know and tell people who are low income that they need to save money each month, not knowing that the interest payments from predatory lenders can create a hole so deep that it seems almost impossible to get out of it. How could we dismantle this huge obstacles many of our Circle leaders were facing? We knew that many were limited by their debt and could not qualify for traditional loans, and we didn't want to create long-term dependency on anything we set up. Any internal loan we would manage wouldn't help people improve their credit scores. We needed a bank, and after a year of searching, we found one. We put money in a mutual fund as security. Along with Circle leaders advising us, we set the criteria that once met would allow Circle leaders to qualify for a loan of 4.5% interest rate. This credit restoration loan helped our Circle leaders pay off high interest loans and improve their credit scores. Our hope was that after paying off this secured loan in 3 years, someone would be able to walk into a bank or a credit union and qualify on their own. Shalana, the first person to utilize this program when her older car needed repairs, faced an age-old dilemma: fix it or buy it new. Together with the loan officer, whom she had established a relationship with, she decided it was better for her to buy a car than to pay the high cost of repairs. When the car dealer gave her their first offer of cost and payment schedule, she told them with utmost confidence, "My bank tells me that you are ripping me off." She qualified for a single-digit interest rate in just 8 months into the program, the lowest she had ever had in her life. Shortly after she got in the car, she drove by our field office. She told me this story and talked about her debt-to-income ratio as she envisioned her next goal. If you had told me 3 years ago that I would get tears in my eyes hearing about debt-to-income ratio, I would have told you you were crazy, but I did hearing Shalana talk. Let me close with one quick story about the value of these relationships. One of our Circle allies, Alan, who is white, was invited by Benita, who is African American, to her daughter's graduation ceremony. They had spent the last 18 months developing community. Alan got to the ceremony before Benita's family arrived. Seats were being saved by another African-American family sitting behind Benita's family. When Alan went to sit down, they said, "Excuse me, these seats are being saved for the family." Alan said, "I know," and proceeded towards the seats. Again, the family behind him said, "Excuse me, these seats are for the family." Alan responded, "I know, I am family." Ending poverty one family, one neighborhood at a time is the desire. In East Winter Garden, the number of households that have an income of $25,000 or less is 42%, almost twice that of the county. Can we actually lower this percentage in 1 square mile? In our lifetime, can that number be 1 in 5 children, or 1 in 6, or even 1 in 10? To realize this dream, St. Luke's is committing time as well as money, developing friendships, setting aside our leadership styles, listening more deeply, and empowering neighborhood residents to express their own dreams. And through it all, we believe that all of us, community and congregation alike, are in need of God's transforming love. Thank you.